The 5 to 7, they're joining.
Oh, they're joining at 5 to 7.
Yes, to speak at 7.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't need this. There's so not many people here. Oh no, I do need it because it's the stupid.
Yes, you need it for the recording.
Okay. So welcome, sparse room but doughty crew, to the first Neighbourhood Plan Advisory Committee meeting for a while, kicking off in January 2026. And do we have apologies?
We do. I have apologies from Councillor Thomas.
So there's some slapped wrists of other people who aren't with us, sadly.
Oh, and apologies from Anthony Chamberlain. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? It probably does, you know. It probably does.
I would say other than that.
Yeah. I mean, they've changed the rules now and made them. If you've ever known anybody that's ever lived in Cone, you need to declare an interest now. Yes, exactly. We all own property or live in Cone, so on that level, we are very interested in Cone. Minutes of the last meeting. Brilliant. All those in favour? Excellent. All right. Public forum. No members of the public here. And item 6, the retirement of Michael Wellock. So this was a little bit out of the blue. Obviously, Michael Wellock has been our planning advisor since the very, very beginning of the neighbourhood plan. And we continued with him for this update because we felt that he understood all the issues, and there are a lot of issues that affect Cone. Rather sadly, he did not let me know. I don't know whether he thought I'd try and talk him out of it. I don't know. But he wrote to Gina and just said, that's it, he's retiring, end of. And that was a shame because at our last meeting, we were expecting that he would be rewriting the policies, but with reference to the new National Planning Policy Framework and the new Pendle Local Plan. But as it transpires, I don't know whether you're aware, there is a new National Planning Policy Framework that's currently under consultation. So in essence, it's possible that it was some kind of serendipitous thing that saved us from doing more rework, in essence, because we'd have finished that by now and would be moving on, and we'd have to go back and do it again. And this is what planning is like. I think Emma's getting a sense of that now. It's just like you think you know where you're going and what's happening, and then something comes in from the side and takes you out. And this certainly took me out. I was just very sad and tired. So item 7, my quest to find a replacement.
One thing though on Michael Wellock, do we want to write him a letter of thanks?
Well, I thought about that. I genuinely thought about that, but then do you know what? He didn't even tell me.
I did thank him in an email. I responded to him.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think we were expecting him to come within a fortnight for a meeting, weren't we?
We were. Yeah.
So actually, I do feel a bit left down, if I'm honest. Because anyway, but as I say, it's all been good. It's all.
And we did assume that his firm would have some continuity as well.
Yeah. Oh no, that's the other thing. So his firm had got out of neighbourhood planning, and if you remember, in the last budget, the government stopped all support for neighbourhood planning, and we've benefited to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds from government support. And I'm very, very grateful to Cone Town Council because they could have said, times are tough, which they are, budgets are constrained, the government's not supporting neighbourhood planning, and we're going to leave it there. And I'm very, very grateful that they didn't say that. So anyway, item 7, the quest to find a replacement planning advisor. So I thought about this long and hard, and I thought what we need is somebody northern, because most neighbourhood plans are in the south of England. They're little villages and they're in sort of the home counties. So any piece of land is viable in those locations many times over. And so therefore most of the advisors for neighbourhood plans are used to that world. That's their real world. So I thought we need to find somebody northern, and possibly somebody who is a planning advisor who isn't a neighbourhood planning advisor. We need to find somebody who perhaps sometimes bats for the other side, because they will help us. So I wrote 40 emails,
A lot of emails.
to all of the big Manchester firms, Leeds firms. I went right across the north, both sides of the Pennines, and I got a lot of rejection. A lot of people just ignoring me. I got one person who just wrote just to have a go at your busking policy.
Yeah.
That different people, one woman wrote and just put everything in red. Do you remember that one? It was a bit depressing.
Yeah.
But anyway, chap from Liverpool who we're going to meet later on, who actually helped us in the dying end of our regulation 18 of our first made plan, and works for locality, came back and said that his firm, Urban Vision, would be interested in doing this work. And at the same time, locality, who have a different approach because they are sort of bigger picture strategy people, they thought that they'd be interested in doing it. So I don't know whether you've ever seen the programme Dragon's Den. I thought it would be best to have two dragons rather than one, because they'd each bring something slightly different to the table. One detailed policy writing and another big picture vision. So I thought we'd benefit from them both, really. So I went back and said, would you be prepared to work together? And they said, yes, they would be prepared to work together. So that was great. So then the next thing was they put in a sort of joint quote. It went to the FES committee. I asked Gina whether I needed to be there. She said no, they seem to really support. And David Clegg said, the thing is, we've spent so much money, Sarah. And actually, we haven't spent money, but the government has spent money. But they saw that we'd put all this effort in, we were going to continue doing it, and that there had been benefits for Cone. So I'm very, very grateful, because it certainly wasn't a foregone conclusion that Cone Town Council continued to go with the project, but at this time, costing them a lot of money. So that's I think, unless there are any questions at that point, end of item 8. Have we got any questions? It's just me telling you what's gone on. No? Happy?
I think we have a bit of time until.
You just emphasise, I mean, locality, as you say, is a gold mine of information.
Yes.
When we were first looking at it, they were planning way back when, and there was the East Conan Villages one and all that sort of thing. The stuff they had on their website was absolutely marvellous to use.
Yes.
And to cannibalise and ask questions about, etc.
Uh-huh.
The split between the two Daves on their work,
well, I mean,
they
I
sort
think
of fall naturally into two different areas, don't they?
yeah, I think it'd be better if they sort
We
of
let
took up
them-
that. Yeah, truly.
Okay.
If I'm honest.
Yeah.
But we can talk about item 9, which is the proposed Keighley Road, Carry Lane Conservation Area. If you remember, in our Made Neighbourhood plan, we designated this as a special character area, partly because of the history as a trading route, Turnpike Road, Drovers route, and gentlemen's villas and sort of Harley Street of Scone, and partly because architecturally it's very handsome. So I spoke to a previous conservation officer at Pendle Council, and she said, had she not been retiring, she'd have made this area a conservation area. So sort of buoyed by that, really, Cone Area Committee decided to get some consultants in to write what's called the character appraisal, which is saying not just what's good about an area, but also what's bad about an area, giving the architectural historical significance. And so we did that, and we went through many iterations. We changed the boundary. The consultants couldn't spell Keighley as it transpired. That was pretty fatal. But we went out to consultation with a kind of post reply thing. Very few people, like sub 20 people replied. 10 were pro it and the rest asked questions. And I thought at that point that it would be approved, like we'd done all the things. So it went to the exec in Nelson, and it was quite clear from the beginning that this was not going to be rubber stamped, and that the exec were asking a lot of questions, particularly about the fact that so few people had written in to say they supported it. So they said, well, we want to do a much bigger consultation. I mean, I had actually suggested that in the first place, to be fair. I'd said, let's have an event at the cricket club, and I was knocked back, So they said they wanted several events in several places, but Neil Watson said they didn't really understand how small the place was in terms of the numbers of places you could have events. So we had 2 3-hour stretches at the library and 1 at the cricket club in the evening. And I thought that I got it completely wrong. I thought the library would just be people passing through, having a look, and they were mainly coming to the library, and that the evening at the cricket club would be rammed with people wanting to ask detailed questions about planning and the significance of conservation areas. And it was completely the other way round. So the library was totally rammed with people. The Saturday session, 3 of us were totally mown out for the whole 3 hours, and there were queues. And the cricket club was tumbleweed mainly. People we'd already seen largely who'd come specifically to meet Neil Watson and to ask detailed questions. So we're told that over 120 people have now engaged with this consultation, which was online. We do not know the results, but we're told that a report will be written and it'll come to the March executive. Obviously, the neighbourhood plan supports this area as a special character area. Before this meeting, Councillor Robinson was asking me if I would support other areas. I said yes, but this has been very tiring to get to here. It's been an awful lot of work. How much did it cost us at Cone Area? Cost us like £5,500, something like that, which is a lot of money out of our budget. And it would be sad if after all this work, it came to nothing. We don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen. I really, really hope that the conservation area can be made to protect and enhance that area. I do believe that over time, conservation areas have a positive impact on a place. And we do know that heritage and conservation drives regeneration and investment, which is what Cone needs. So I can see very, very few downsides, even if I lived in the conservation area, and mainly upsides, but time will tell. Anyway, any questions on that? No. Interesting. Yeah.
Emma, sorry, can I ask you to use your microphone? It's just they won't be able to hear on the recording.
Yeah, no, it's. No, I agree. You can say it all again. It doesn't matter.
I'm just intrigued to know whether the people that came to the event lived within the conservation area where it's been highlighted in red, or whether it was just general members of the Colne public.
It was both. So there were people there who were like, I'd like to have an extension on the back of my house. I live in the area. How will it affect me? And they wanted to ask very specific questions. I live in the area and I'd like to replace my front door. How would that affect me? I live in the area and I'd like to change the colour of my windows. How would that affect me? But then there were lots of other people, pro and anti, who were coners. So quite a lot of them were like coming up and saying, I live in Waterside. Why have you not picked Waterside? Why can't Waterside be a conservation area? And I was just like, there's no reason. I said, it's not an either or situation. It's not like if this becomes a conservation area, there won't be another area chosen. Personally, I'd like to see another character area around the Langroyd laundrette. There's a little triangle that we put in the neighbourhood plan there. I'd like to see that brought forward. But having this conservation area doesn't mean you can't have another one. And then some people came up and they said, I really, really want to protect this area. I've always loved this area. I used to live in it, but now I've moved and I feel that I can't comment. And I said, you absolutely can comment. One young girl said, my great-grandfather built Mabel Street. I said, oh, why is it called Mabel Street? She went, I don't know. I said, what a shame, because I'd love to know the answer to that. Like, what's your great-grandma called Mabel? Anyway, her great-grandfather built Mabel Street, and until last year, she lived in Mabel Street. And she has very strong views on Mabel Street. She's got a heritage tree that was planted in his memory. She goes and visits, etc., etc., etc. And I said, you can very much respond to the consultation and put all of this in, because, you know, we're a community. Other people came up and said there's no point having a conservation area because conservation areas don't do anything. So with some of the people, I was able to persuade them that they did, you know, so it could be something like Lancashire County Council decides to change all the bins. The ones in a conservation area have to be cast iron. They have to be more considered. Lancashire County Council, looking at the signage in a conservation area, has to be more considered. So over time, the change is small but positive. You know, if the shop fronts are changed, in the future, those shop fronts would have to be conservation area compliant. Go on, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it is vital on conservation areas. And a lot of people say, oh, well, things never change. Things do. And a classical example of not being protected, if you go to York, to the museum at York, they have a street of shops.
Uh-huh.
And every race over them, oh, it's fantastic. The sad fact is, those shop fronts were once in Colne.
I think at least one of them was. That's
No, I've been told most of them were from Colne.
right.
And the sad fact is that Colne was destroyed, trying to modernize, and it failed. If there had been a conservation area, it would have been protected.
It's really conservation areas, just it's a little bit more scrutiny. Things are given a little bit more, a little bit more thought. It's not immense, and certainly round here, there's no Article 4 direction. But
Let him in.
Anyway, so fingers crossed for that, and I think everybody in this room would be pro it, but we'll see. So, item 10. Welcome to Dave Chatwin. Hello. We're just
Hi
on
there.
Hello, Dave. We're just on item 10, the Pendle Local Plan.
Are we not going to go back to
Oh,
item 8 so that the
no. Well, we'll okay. All right, because that feeds in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So item 8. We've done item 9 about the conservation area. Item 8, the initial planning meeting with locality and urban vision. So it's just to explain to the people in the room, sadly we've got a low turnout, about our first online meeting and how we are trying to create a new draft structure for our policies and how that informed your visit. So if you'd like to just give a little bit of background to the team.
Yeah, so I've sent a draft structure of policies, and as we discussed when we were doing the tour around and the meeting, what the intention is, one, to add a level of detail to the policies so they're more effective in the development management process, and to localize them much more. So the structure of policies I've sent through is based on the policies in the previous plan, but you'll see on there I'm suggesting a level of detail where, for example, where you're making representations on planning applications, it'll be much clearer whether a scheme meets the requirements of the policy or is contrary to the policy. And similarly for the local planning authority, there should be greater clarity on whether a scheme.
I could just interrupt to explain to the team. Essentially, Obviously, our plan developed over 6.5 years, and some elements were bolted on after Regulation 14. So one of those was the design code, for example. The design code, I think it's generally a good design code. It was praised by the examiner, but it was bolted on. So Dave's idea, which is very sensible, is to embed the things like that, that's our evidence base, like the design code, within our policies, so that anybody that's making a decision, like a developer or a planning officer, can clearly see Barrowford Road, this is what I need to be taking care of on Barrowford Road. I think that's reasonable, yes?
Yeah, I mean that's it, basically. So that because if someone if the policy refers to an external document, a lot of decision makers will, at best, they'll scan it. They won't necessarily pick up the issues that are important to you. Whereas if they're written into the policies, and not just the design policy, but the growth policies, the environment policies, design policy, then they're actually part of the statutory policy. And it's much more likely that they'll be effective in the development management process. So it's very much about spelling out to decision makers, to developers and their professional teams, clear requirements on what development needs to do.
And we had some policies which were a little ambiguous, you felt as well, didn't you? And we knew as councillors, as borough councillors, that there were some policies that we thought read well to us, but when they were actually tested in the planning process, for example, the dark skies at EG garages, we thought that was a solid policy. When it was actually tested, the policies did not do what we wanted them to do.
So I mean, again, what we're proposing to do is really spell out and also make the policies more bullet pointy. So it's that they read less as narrative and more as a checklist of what the development needs to do, and we'll do the policies as numbered and numbered clauses, lettered sub clauses, so that in making representations can actually point out where it's policy compliant and where the scheme clearly doesn't meet the requirements of the policy. So very much focused not just on meeting the legal requirements, meeting the basic conditions and other legal requirements, but on trying to make it easier to use in the development management process, and also recognizing that some officers, some decision makers are more experienced than others. So it really is a case of spelling it out as much as possible in plain English.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for that approach?
I think, let me just let the other Dave in.
Oh,
It's just arrived.
too many Daves.
No, I think my feedback on that one is when you get an officer's report on an application, I think as Dave just pointed out, you want to be able to spoon feed them to say, where is it in the neighbourhood plan you look? When you get one now, it says, what's the planning framework? And you go, well, there's the NPPF. It occasionally points out relevant chapters or paragraphs of that. And then it goes through the Pendle local plan and it says DM this, SP that, DM, and there's like a page of the Pendle local plan, obviously brand new, which has in all this thing set out really quite nicely. And then at the end of it, they just put code neighbourhood plan design code. It means we've got to get the design right as best as possible for the right area.
Yeah, it's almost something
and then that's it. And you're thinking, but hang on, it's in the town centre, it's a rural thing, and let's look at this, look at that. So there's other things to bring in. And I think if we can reframe it like that, then it makes it easier for the officer to be able to say, does this, stack up, or does it contradict with what the application is? So the right way forward, I think.
I think also that probably does need raising with the local planning authority, because planning policy, national policy and planning practice guidance is very clear that the statutory development plan is both a local plan and a neighbourhood plan. And also on non-strategic matters where they say different things, the later plan carries more weight. So they should be dealing with neighbourhood plan policies with equal rigour and to the same extent as local plan policies. So it does raise a question if there's a difference in detail between the local plan and neighbourhood plan analysis in their reports. It does raise an issue of whether they're actually applying Section 38 correctly, which is a section requiring development to be in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So I think in letters of representation, I would always point out that the neighbourhood plan is part of the statutory development plan and it's a later plan, so Section 38 applies. I think it's worth pointing that out in every single letter just to remind the planning authority of the status of the neighbourhood plan.
Well, we're very lucky that David is the chairman of Cone Area Committee. So he gets all of these planning reports, and for the first year,
For the first year,
they didn't mention our neighbourhood plan.
So you've forgotten to mention that. Or there'd be one in Fulridge and they'd say, what about the neighbourhood plan? I go, it's not in Cone. Forget it.
They're very confused by geography, these people.
If it's not Pendle, then, you know, if it's not that Pendle plan, then they're very confused sometimes.
So David has sent back the officers' reports and said, just try harder.
Yeah.
Please reflect the long-range views policy. Please reflect the rural policy. Please reflect this. What about our hot food takeaways? You know, come on, let's bring this all in.
And they have done, to be fair.
They're getting better.
Yeah.
It's a long thing.
But it sounds like we're going to make it easier for them, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay, so hello to other Dave. Perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself as Dave, my David, too many Davids. He asked, what's the difference between the two Daves? So I said, I'm not going to answer that. I'll let them say what the difference, the Dave difference is.
Do you want to go first, Dave?
Well, we're both on screen, so I think people can judge for themselves. But just to introduce it, I can introduce who we are, and then you can. So I'm from Urban Vision Enterprise. We're town planners, and we were a partner with locality in all of the national programs actually. So that's why I've worked with other Dave over really a decade, more than a decade, on neighbourhood planning. So over to you.
I think you've probably said it all. So I used to work for locality, but probably 12, 14, perhaps longer ago. I'm still contracted to locality to sort of wind up what was the neighbourhood planning support programme, but increasingly working out how to deliver ongoing support to groups. And I've worked with Dave locality and the other consultants that are in place in terms of the locality setup for a good decade, if not longer, basically.
Okay. And your different skills, I think that was really what David was mentioning.
So
what are the sort of like the different approaches?
So Dave, again, do you want to cover off the stuff that you're doing specifically here, sort of thing?
Yeah. We're town planners. We work all over the country. We've worked on, I don't know, somewhere between 225 and 250 neighbourhood plans over the years, but we do a lot of other planning work as well. And my other company, we work for developers, so we deal with the system from both sides, if you like. But we're a professional consultancy, town planners, and we specialise in things like neighbourhood planning, regeneration, historic environments, housing sites, policy writing, etc.
Cool. And likewise, also a town planner, experience and sort of quite long experience in terms of asset-based development within communities and for communities, and that's everything from sort of village halls, town halls, through to complete delivery of housing projects. And I think the split of work in terms of this particular support that we're providing is Dave's leading on the sort of neighbourhood plan policies and elements of it, and I should be looking at elements of viability and deliverability of sites as they are sort of proposed for allocation, basically.
Okay, super.
One question for probably Dave Chapman, I think this one. You mentioned about locality and your relationship with it, etc. Now we know that the government has pulled funding for these sorts of plans nowadays. What do you think the future of neighbourhood plans is?
I don't think they're going to backtrack in terms of the legislation, partly because it's enabling legislation. The truth of it is, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, sort of thing. It's a choice that qualifying bodies make. I think it's pretty clear from all of the conversations and discussions that we've had with central government and continue to have with central government that the onus really is on how neighbourhood plans support housing growth at the sort of local level. But increasingly, they're also recognizing that actually significance around supporting mitigation, adaptation to climate change, biodiversity, and regeneration in the sort of widest sense are issues that actually neighbourhood plans can and should deal with, basically. And I think playing into that as well is the conversations that are being had around local government reorganisation, where it's very clear that as a consequence of local government reorganisation, local communities and plan making processes at that level are going to be more challenging to do and more challenging for communities to feed into any sort of local plan making process and or strategic plan making process. So the neighbourhood plan probably will continue for a number of years until there's probably another change in local plan making processes, or we go through the next circle. In terms of funding, though, I don't think there's a ghost in hell's chance of central government committing any more funding to neighbourhood planning. That said, I think there will likely be some programs of support for sort of placemaking type activity, and neighbourhood plans that cover that sort of aspect of it, particularly in terms of, I think regeneration design work will probably be able to hook into some funding there once that becomes available.
That's encouraging in a way, given our theme is regeneration, or one of our big themes is. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you would hope. I mean, one of the other things that is being lobbied for is support for implementation of plans as well, because one of the things that's not happened well, it's not happened full stop actually, is funding to support the implementation of some of the work that could drop out of neighbourhood plans that could be quite successful quite quickly.
Okay, thanks.
If I could chip in as well, there is a live consultation at the moment on the national
That's later in the agenda.
Right. If I just mention how it relates to your question there, though, is it does set out much more clearly the relationship between strategic plans, local plans, and neighbourhood plans. So there's no watering down there of neighbourhood plans, but there are differences in detail. But if you're responding to, well, I'll deal with it in a minute. But there are certain key points I think to make on that consultation.
Good. Splendid. So, team, are you sort of happy with item 8, initial thoughts, planning, etc., all of that?
Yep.
Happy to move on. So we've done item 9. So item 10 is the Pendle local plan. So we're on the very last day of the Pendle local plan. I think we've only got 24 hours to go in the judicial review window, and we're hoping that nothing happens in the next 24 hours. Otherwise, at that point, the Pendle local plan is made. And just a reminder for those of you that don't know, this plan is based on the 2023 National Planning Policy Framework under the Conservative government housing methodology, which doesn't include the sort of change with the urban uplift and all of that, which means that it's a much smaller annual housing target than is the actual housing target that this area faces. And obviously Colne is part of the urban corridor, which takes 70% of Pendle's housing target. The plan, I think, is a really good plan. I think it's such a shame that it's now being rewritten because, you know, with my other hat on for the climate emergency, they really listened to the climate emergency working group. There's so many changes were made that were positive changes in terms of ecology and it's such a sensitive, well-reasoned plan. I would be so supportive of it. But David and I went to 6 days of the 11 days of the public hearing, and obviously throughout the examiner, the inspector was very, very clear that the team must start again immediately on a new plan under the new NPPF. And I just genuinely do not see how it is at all possible for the plan to be changed in such a way that would allow that vast amount of housing between now and 2040 and fulfill the underlying arguments of the landscape, the upland landscape. I just think the two cannot coexist together. They just genuinely cannot coexist together. I think it would be impossible. It's not my job to do it. I'm not having to do it, but it is being done. And then, of course, set amongst that, we've got the local government reorganisation. Pendle Council wants to be in something called Burpendale, which is Burnley, Rossendale, and Pendle. Rossendale have basically said, not on your Nelly. So they don't want to be in Burpendale. And all the different councils have submitted their different choices to the government. The government will decide who we're in bed with in June. I think the sensible one would be Ribble Valley, Rossendale, Blackburn with Darwin, Hyndburn, and Burnley, and us. And that is a lot of people, but it's the number that the government wanted, 500,000 people, and it's a more diverse area than Burpendale. We have no influence over it, but the point is the Pendle Council planners are working now on a new plan to the NPPF, which we know is under consultation for a new version of the NPPF. So that's already a bit impossible. But surely in 2028, when whatever the new entity is, the new unitary entity, they'll sit down and go, well, we've got to make a plan for the unitary area. Surely that's how it'll work. I don't see, there's so much upheaval. Even if Pendle were in some kind of miracle way to make a brand new plan that was compliant with the NPPF, it's going to be in a new unitary area. What's your views on this, Dave's?
Do you want first dibs, Dave?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know those wider areas well enough to really have a view on what makes the most sensible area for a new authority.
Well, we don't get to pick anyway. The government picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those, so those decisions should be known spring of this year as to what those areas are. I mean, from all of the conversations that I'm having with lots of local authorities across the country, many are in the process of starting local plan making work, but recognise that actually, in some places, what they're thinking currently is that actually, where you've got local authorities coming together, actually there will be effectively more original planning departments working on the local plan for that particular part of the local authority area. So, it's possible that Pendle planners could exist within a new entity, the new local authority entity sort of thing, so that they can create, because others will be doing the same. There are other local authorities going, well, actually, there is no point really in terms of doing anything other than initial scoping work before we set up in spring to know who we could be working with, and therefore the sort of collaborative efforts that we might need to work with some of those other local authorities, particularly in the southeast. That is a conversation that's ongoing, where lots of local authorities do not have a 5-year housing land supply. The honest answer to your question is, I'm not sure that actually anybody really knows, and we're in uncharted territory to a certain extent. But we do know that there's clarity now in terms of local plan making processes and the timescale that you've got to do it. And I guess actually the pressure will be on lots of local authorities to meet those timescales from government, whilst at the same time gearing up to become larger local authority areas, basically.
I think the whole thing is impossible, especially when you
I don't.
realise that 90% of all councillors are going to lose their posts. So you're going to perhaps get a new cadre of councillors who, frankly, have no idea of what they're doing or planning.
No, I mean,
You throw that into the mix as well as you've got all new councils.
I think you're right. I mean, there are too many unknowns in any of this to actually work out which, if you like, which thing will trump something else, if that makes sense, to actually move it through. And of course, actually, there's almost bound to be some level of feedback to government once they've announced those areas that they think are going to go through the process, and what those areas are to become as well, if that makes sense. Because at the moment, again, aware of my own situation down here with effectively what, 5, 6 local authorities within the sort of Devon area, and that includes the 2 unitaries, and each one of them had a different view about what it should be like, and presented a different view in terms of the suggestions going back. So the 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 real test will be, actually, are those local authorities able and willing to work with each other once it becomes clear what it is that they're going to be doing, if that makes sense. And one suspects that that'll take a bit of time to work out. And already here, the joint local plan work, which should have been starting a review, has been delayed as a consequence.
Right. So we can expect there'll be more delays along the way, I think.
There is as well. There's been amalgamations previously over the past decade or so. So there are examples of how they've dealt with merging different local authority areas into one authority. So you've got Cheshire East and Cheshire West and Chester examples. So there are examples you could look at. The local plan that's about to be adopted will remain in force as the adopted plan until the new authority makes the local plan for the wider area. So it will survive as the local plan for the time.
That's very positive for us in the short term, in any case.
Yeah.
Nobody there? We thought there was somebody at the front door, but perhaps we'll knock and run. Okay, all right. Any other questions about that, Ian?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually quite disturbing if you think about it. And this is not just something that's happening overnight. This has been a slow, gradual process that goes back to 1974, when they destroyed 3 boroughs, which was Barnoldswick, Colne and Nelson, and created districts. I think the only people that benefit from that are the government, not the people. And we've seen that time and time again, where you've got, in effect, Colne Area Committee can refuse a planning application or can approve. It can then go to development control, and councillors who've never lived in Colne can totally overthrow it. And,
Well, I do support that, truthfully, because I'm on development management. And what I would say is that some councillors are too close to their areas and don't make decisions according to the National Planning Policy Framework. And planning decisions have to be consistent. And it's great that we've got that local decision making in Pendle. But the new...
That's what I was going to get at, Charles. I was going to lead on to that. The problem we're going to have is that when you go to a unitary, then you could end up with this, I don't know, ridiculous situation where you've got a small group of councillors in Blackburn Town Hall.
No, I don't think it's going to be that.
We don't know. This is the problem.
No, I'm looking at the Daves because actually the government is consulting now to get rid of councillors making decisions on most planning applications. It will just be council officers, which I do think is worrying because they genuinely do not know the area at all.
No, and
they live in the area, they know the area. But the government's consulting and councillors can only be involved in really large planning applications. Is that so?
So there has been a general trend towards that over, I've worked in planning over 3 decades, and there's been a continuing trend of delegation over that time. I mean, the elected members would still have a scrutiny role there, but it makes the representations from town and parish councils even more important in the process to give that localised knowledge and localised view to make sure the officers are aware of those localised issues. So it makes that all the more important. But it has been a direction of travel for quite some time. When when I started in planning, most applications went to committees.
Yeah,
I think there's a danger here. I've always had this feeling that all these plans from the government are developer-led, not community-led. It's like saying, oh, Colne, you've got to have 500 houses, whatever. Who's benefiting from that? Are the people of Colne going to benefit from that? Answer, no.
Well...
No, because, hold on, we had this situation once where they were proposing to put new build houses in a certain part of Colne, because we needed them. The people of Colne needed. I said, right, how much for a single bedroom flat? £150,000. How can people in Colne afford £150,000 one bedroom flat? Well, because we'll have to bring people out of Colne in to live in them.
Okay.
So how is that benefiting Colne?
So looking at the planners again, I think they'll agree with me. This is always couched as public benefit. And obviously we're opening a new market now in Colne this year. We're going to have a new market. So planners would say, oh hurrah, 500 new houses means 500 new people to spend money. I know you're looking at me like that. This is the thinking. 500 new people who will be creating jobs in construction, who'll be creating jobs in other places in the community, and will be spending money in the town centre. And I would say that it's always a balance, isn't it? And I think planners are very, very keen to say, let's have 500 new houses. And that might be positive in some senses, but it might also be negative. But it's couched, isn't it, in planning tilt as public benefits. They always talk about the public benefit weighed against the harm.
So there is, particularly in policy drafting, trying to get the balance between economic, social and environmental sustainability is, it's written into legislation and policy that you have to do that in local policy making. I think there is an issue, and there has been for a long, long time, that the people writing national policy and policy advisors, they tend to be London-based, and they tend to assume London type land and property economies. So, I do work in Camden, and you're paying over £1 million for even a very, very small residential property there. God knows how anyone affords that. Well, I know how they afford that. They live in shared houses where you have one room, but that assumption on land and property economy is very much built into national policy making, and there's much less understanding at the moment of areas where viability is the challenge. So it isn't land and property price inflation, but it's viability, and where the barrier to getting on the housing ladder isn't cost, but local economic opportunity and the need to incentivize investment in jobs and employment. And so the live consultation on the MPPF, that's really a key point to make there, is to try and the MPPF has the same policy for affordable housing in Camden as it does in North Liverpool, and that makes no sense whatsoever. That's why housing policy is
the most affordable house in Cone already exists. It's already been built. You can't build a new house in Cone for less than the houses that are already here. It's not possible. So the new houses that are built, even affordable with 20% off, they are by definition not affordable. And I think David went to government a few years ago with our local paper and showed some people in the department the property section of the local paper, and they actually commented that they could get a kitchen for one of their houses for the same as one of our Cone houses. And that's true. You know, our son lives in Camden in a flat, and it does cost around that. Meanwhile, we, the Coburn Prices, have always lived in the north, and we've never ever owned a house that is anything like the rebuilding cost of the house. And currently, we've just had our house assessed for its rebuilding cost, and it is much more than double its actual value, much more than double. And that could never exist in the home counties, could it? That the house is, the land is less than worthless, really, in essence, that our house is built on, because our house would cost so much to rebuild. But that's been so with all 3 houses that we've ever owned. They've never been worth anything like the rebuilding cost, and that was what the argument you gave to those people.
Brandon Lewis was the housing bloke at the time, and he was just speechless. He was. But I think in terms of that, coming back to that idea of the unitary and how that works, you will end up with, I mean, our supposed target under a Labour environment is 333, and yet we've got 177, I think it is. So
148.
You're looking at
currently
more than doubling.
Oh no, 177
with the buffer in place.
Yeah, the buffer.
But you're sort of doubling what our target is, and if you add in Burnley, which has got a similar target, and Blackburn, which have a bigger target, and you've got the whole viability thing, which means that no one will build them. And you end up with, I mean, you went on that webinar where
later in the agenda.
There are places which are passing houses and passing houses and passing houses left, right, and centre, and the developer just sits on them.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, who holds all the power? It's developer led, as Ian says.
Yeah.
They're in control of what they do and how they do it. In the meantime, because those areas are failing to deliver those houses, then lo and behold, they have to pass more.
Well,
so it's phenomenal, really.
We're having this plan as our response, as our defence to the very difficult environment that
we definitely need that.
Yes. We're in. So, moving on.
Oh, sorry, there's another question as well. Because everybody keeps mentioning this magical word, employment. We are going to have so many jobs that we need so many houses. Well, hold on a second. Let me think. Folds. Oh, no, that closed. Belwoven. Oh, it closed. Whitesides. Oh, no, they closed. I could carry on and name the amount of firms that's closed in Cone. How many firms can you name that have started in Cone to replace them?
Well, the little ones, I mean, there are incubator firms.
Very small.
The employers, you're absolutely right. The big employers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're going to do is build all these very expensive houses on lovely green fields, because that's what they want.
Yes, okay.
So that they can jump in their very posh cars and drive 20, 30, 40 miles to their very well-paid jobs outside the area.
Yeah.
Therefore, as I said, who's it benefiting? We need a revolution. We need the people to take over.
Right. Just a counter to that.
Calm down.
But hypothetically.
No, but in actuality, when we moved to Cone for the first time, I worked in Manchester. So I drove every single day to Manchester and back, and I brought the money I earned in Manchester back to the cone economy. We employed cone workmen, cone builders to do all the building work, and we spent money in cone shops. No.
Well, I'll be shot later. No, but
And the other thing as well is that having been on various business meetings with things like Rolls-Royce and Silent Night and whatever, when they've wanted to employ people in sort of higher paid technical jobs or even sort of admin overhead type jobs, they've not been able to find the workers locally with those skills. They're prepared to pay, but they then had to go elsewhere.
We don't have time.
But they'd love it if they could move those people into the area much closer.
We don't have time.
give local people the skill, give local young people the skills needed instead of employing people from outside the area, instead of closing down colleges and stopping adult education.
You're now back to the whole education forum.
Right,
now,
right.
A different topic.
Okay, the world is in an abyss. But moving on to item 11, which is the nature recovery strategy. I hope you've had a chance to look at it, including the dates. I think it's really, really positive for us and our neighbourhood plan. It's been a terrific amount of work from Lancashire County Council. We did input into it and gave our views, and I met at the climate emergency the chap that wrote our cone bit, and he has said that he is prepared to have more representations from us, and he will implement it on the habitats map. So his name's Ollie, very, very positive young man. He really believes that we can make big strides in sort of recovering our upland ecology. And, you know, if you've read the background document, the statistics in how nature depleted we are, it's really shocking. But there is hope. So, have any of you got any questions on that? That's not to do with us having a revolution.
How does that factor into our neighbourhood plan then?
Well, it's something that we can bring in environmental policies. We can cross-reference to the habitats map and some of those upland ideas, can't we, James?
Well, you certainly refer to it in the rationale to the policies, but obviously the policy itself is setting requirements for the developer to meet. So it's certainly part of the evidence base that informs the policy.
So in a way, you could use that strategy to say, don't trash this area because it's quite special and needs recovering.
I think it was one thing you can really highlight is because one of the things to try and do with the neighbourhood plan, I think, is to make sure we're not just replacing biodiversity, but where possible, development retains. It's basically not erasing the site and starting again. It's trying to retain what already has biodiversity value. So you can certainly write that into the environment policies and design policies.
I think at the moment we see that although there's a BNG review done and they all look at the percentage of enhancements or detriments, then all they end up saying is, well, the developer's going to make a contribution to a pot of money you can spend elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of it's just got rid of that way.
No, exactly. One of the things you can try and encourage is making sure we're not destroying biodiversity and then just paying into a pot, but we're actually making sure development works with what's there.
I think the habitats map, we've got the areas of Atlantic salmon, we've got the breeding grounds of the curlew, we've got the ancient woodland.
Got the red squirrel coming back.
We believe the red squirrel's coming back, seen in Waterside. Yeah. Two squirrels gambling on a fence in Waterside. Actually, the red squirrel sort of northwest person has verified that and sent that to me. near Broken Banks. So I think that we can sort of highlight, perhaps using that habitats map, very specific areas that underpin that nature recovery, and then they've got the sort of opportunity areas to bring forward. I would love it if we can bring that into our plan.
So what I've done, I've just put a note in the list of policies just on retention of biodiversity. So we really emphasise that in the policies when I draft the policies. So if there are biodiversity features in the area that are really important, if you can highlight those to me, we can refer to those.
That would be powerful, that one, because you could see that being written down to say this will trash this area. The contribution is offered by the developer to go into a pot, and we go, no, hang on a minute, that contradicts with policy XYZ of the new neighbourhood plan.
Yes.
Exactly, and it's actually quite
Nice
destructive to destroy biodiversity and then to replace it elsewhere. But I mean, the simple one is retention of trees, you know, and incorporating them into the design and layout of a scheme. But where there's real features of real biodiversity value in the area, we could highlight those.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right. Super. Okay, so we've touched on it about 3 times, but item 12, the new draft NPPF. Now, Gina likes to keep me busy, so she sent me on 2 webinars. And the first webinar was by the government's chief planner. And she is a very pleased with herself woman. My goodness, she's so pleased with herself. Everything in the garden is rosy in the world of governmental planning.
Is that Joanna?
Sorry?
Is that Joanna?
Waverley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's so happy. Anyway, so on this call, there were 850 planners and council-y people. So there was no chatting. She just basically told us how fabulous everything was, especially near railway stations, where the development, if you've got 4 trains an hour, you are cooking with gas in terms of development.
Only if they're going in 2 different directions, because if they're all going in the same direction, you'd be stuffed on that one at the moment. Sorry.
Our trains only go 4 miles an hour.
Oh yeah. Well, sorry, you're probably stuffed then, aren't you? You know.
Anyway, so she was really, really positive. I found it a very frustrating call, and there was no discussion of viability or anything like that. The next one was what was it called? The Planning Advisory Service webinar. And all the people on that call were councillors, but they were much more exalted councillors than me. They were heads of planning committees for things like rural Cambridgeshire or all of Gateshead. And these people were so furious, it was quite amusing. Some of them were allowed to speak, and some of them just put really snarky comments in the side chat. So the woman who was Cambridgeshire, she had in the last year, not she personally, but her committee, had passed 9,000 new homes for rural Cambridgeshire, and the developers had built 2,000 of them, which meant that they were running horribly behind, which meant that the government said you must build thousands of more homes in rural Cambridgeshire. And she said about the power of neighbourhood planning for some of these villages, but she also said that the risk for that and the obvious land banking that's taking place is astounding. Meanwhile, the angry woman on the side chat from Gateshead was writing, these people don't understand about viability. There's literally nowhere that's viable in Gateshead at all. And we've got this massive, massive target. It's just ridiculous. And at the end, they said that they got some government people who were monitoring the chat and listening to the comments from councillors, and they assured us all of this would be fed in to their consultation. So my feeling is that, as we have done before, we should respond as Code Neighbourhood Plan to this consultation. And I felt that I had some thoughts to put down. But then I thought, perhaps I shouldn't do that. What I should do is wait to see what Pendle's chief planner, Neil Watson, says, because he's taking that to the next exec, see whether there are any good points in his view, and taking what I've learned so far, take that forward and make a response to this NPPF. I mean, it was clear from it, David, that neighbourhood planning is still very much in the mix, that they weren't getting rid of it, because obviously we are bringing forward some houses. But it just came across as so incredibly self-satisfied. Dave's.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That viability is simply not on the agenda at the moment. And interestingly, if you look at things like grey belts policy, it actually excludes the purpose of green belts based around urban regeneration because it's just absolutely not on the radar. Our previous experience suggests that housing targets do not increase the rate of delivery, and we know where there's viability problems that increasing the land supply actually can widen those viability problems. So I think in responding to the NPPF, viability, and viability are key points to make, and particularly the point that government is making a lot of announcements around growth, but increasing they're actually not. The policy doesn't increase the rate of delivery of housing; it increases the land supply, and in some areas that may increase the rate of delivery of housing, but in other areas it will actually widen the viability gap. It's interesting in Cambridgeshire that there's a massive planning permissions, and developers are often criticised for land banking, and some developers, they buy land at unrealistic prices and then bank it because they made a mistake. Basically, what they thought was a bargain wasn't. But where you've got that extent of planning permission, that's risky for the developer, because if too much of that housing comes forward at the same time, their business model depends on regulating the rate of delivery. So I think behind the targets and the land supply led approach, it's London assumptions on land and property values, and it doesn't take account of viability. So that really is a key point to make. As well, I've read very briefly. I've done a skim read of the NPPF, but I did read a barrister's briefing of it as well, and one of the points they made is a presumption in favour of development and settlements. And I think a point to make there is settlements are complicated, and particularly the relationship. It's good to get people living in town and city centres. That's really good for vitality. But it needs careful management, or you can end up with conflicts between residential, commercial, sometimes long established industrial uses that suddenly have got amenity issues with new residents. So it needs really careful management in complex urban areas if we're to get mixed use people, and again, I think it's very much a deregulating approach at the moment, and the point, I think one of the points to make is that maximising growth isn't about weak planning. In fact, that could undermine growth and create difficulties for not just residents but businesses, commercial interests. So the settlements, I haven't gone through it in detail. I need to get my head around it. But
I was quite angry when they said we've got new and extra protections for heritage, and I was like, oh, hello. And then they said we've got new and extra protections for local green spaces and sort of ecological spaces. So I was like, oh, hello, this is looking good. I was feeling positive. And then they started with the exceptions. And it's basically, unless you don't have a 5-year housing land supply, if you're in deficit, if the positive tilt has been applied, it seems to me that it's not worth the paper it's written on for most places. Certainly the woman from Gateshead was losing it.
The heritage chapter's always been quite an oddly written chapter, and there is a reason for that. There was a heritage bill proposed, which thankfully was abandoned because of the nationalisation of Northern Rock during the banking crisis. But all the language in the NPPF is about that bill, and so it uses terms like significance, which it doesn't always equate very well to the wording in legislation and policy, and you've got historic England to thank for that wording. I'm afraid, but again, what the NPPF doesn't do with heritage is make the link with regeneration, high street recovery, etc. So again, it's a protectionist view rather than an understanding of how heritage has been used in towns and villages as actually a means of achieving regeneration. It'd be really good to see that, because while there's a perception of heritage and environmental protection or growth, then
Yes.
they're not going to come off very well. But it's actually the one of the points to make, I think, fundamentally, is that heritage is the means to achieving regeneration and growth, and it'd be good to see that written much more explicitly into. But basically, heritage has moved to a different ministry from planning in 1990, and since then it's looked at in cultural terms rather than social and economic terms.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
so my reading of it, I mean, it echoes all of those things, right? I mean, I would say, I think, firstly, I really concerned about participation in planning on this, because actually it's not writ large. In effect, it seems to me to be watered down, full stop, right? I accept the fact that actually neighbourhood planning survives and actually is, if you like, it's clearer about what neighbourhood planning should be. So to that extent, it's probably quite good. But actually, the truth of it is actually public participation in planning, full stop, looks to me to be being watered down. I mean, I think the other thing that this is doing is it's moving us more from a sort of discretionary system that we've got at this stage to actually limiting the scope of some local decision making processes. And there's a worry there, and that echoes back to the previous conversation about the role that elected members had, the role of development management committees, planning committees. I guess the third broad point would be it's the railways. If you've got two trains an hour going in each direction, then actually you can crack on. Basically, it moves us to a more sort of permissive planning regime as well. There are a number of areas of that, and I question mark whether actually that works for the whole of the country. It may well work in certain areas, but the viability issue is one of those that will limit that working in a number of places, full stop. Um, I think colleagues also, when we read through it, actually there used to be commentary on community-led housing schemes, and that appears to have gone completely. And I guess the other thing that I would be worried about is what appears to be a sort of almost watering down of some of the significance of net zero, meeting targets around climate change as well. So broadly it looks to me as though it's trying to force a numbers game more than anything else, to be fair. But
Yes.
that's pretty scathing. I mean, it's like, and I guess the question is actually, how much will government listen when the responses to consultation come back, and we won't know that until they do respond.
It was very, very interesting, the anger of the councillor one, the second webinar, the 250 councillors. Obviously, the ones down south were furious about all the grey belts that had been magicked up that they saw previously as green belts. There were all the angry northern councillors with the viability thing.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
so interesting that I went to both the webinars. I went to the smug Everything in the Garden is Rosy webinar, and then I went to the other one where people gave their real world planning views for their areas. I do feel that we won't be listened to by this government. That's not a political comment. The level of smugness in that first one, they're on that track and they're going to keep on going. The only thing that will change them will be a change of government. Steve Reeder said, build, baby, build. He doesn't care about the heritage or the ecology. I'm definitely going to put a proper response from Cone Town Council in, as I always do, even if I feel it's shouting into the wind, so that we can tick that box. Yes, we responded to it. This is what we said. But my response was very much along what you were saying in terms of widening the viability gap. And it's an argument that I've had with Neil Watson over many years. If we make lots of green spaces available for housing, it makes our regeneration areas within the settlement boundary more and more impossible, and creates the donut effect within Cone. I believe that really, really strongly. There are many reasons why you would want to live in Cone. It is a lovely little town, albeit highly affordable, which a lot of people would say would be a good thing. So,
So past experience does suggest that the document will change quite substantially in response to consultation responses. So that has certainly been the case with previous versions of the MPPF. And then if you remember the planning white paper, which was actually a green paper, much of that didn't happen because of the level of response. So it's really worth making representations, and again, quite often it takes them a long time to do the analysis because they do get a lot of responses. A couple of, I mean, the viability point's fundamental, I think, making that, and the MPPF together with the housing targets are going to undermine housing delivery in some areas. There's a few matters of detail that I should mention. One, the existing MPPF allows the neighbourhood plan to provide a proof against the 5-year land supply if there are policies and site allocations. Now, in the new version, it's just site allocations. So I think it's worth pointing out for neighbourhood plans that it's not just site allocations, but it can be regeneration zones, it can be high street recovery policies, it can be employment policies, it can be settlement boundaries, particularly in rural areas. And there's many different ways in enabling housing, not just site allocations, because that's quite limiting. It means the neighbourhood plan has got to do at least one site allocation now to trigger the protection against the tilted balance. But the way it will be worded, that wouldn't be the case. So that's a key point to make, I think. And
Gina promises me she'll capture that in the minutes.
Hoping the recording works.
Right, but I think the whole viability thing is fundamental. I mean, the thing to bear in mind as well is the government's chief planner is there to promote the ideas, but they're implementers rather than policy makers, so they have to put a positive slant on government policy.
I mean,
it's the policy advisors that are actually the people to get, that need to be persuaded.
This woman was so on message. She could not have been more on message. I hope that she was incentivized in some way, because she definitely had her full shredded wheat, and she basically got out little pom-poms and did a dance. She was that happy. She'd have been quite gutted by the second webinar.
But she is an implementer, not a policy maker. So
Right,
it's really ministers and their policy advisors that need to be persuaded, and that's where the weight of representations made has led to change in the past.
All right. Well, I won't feel so hopeless about the representation that I'll put in then. So if everybody's happy, sort of moving on to the next agenda. So you probably saw that one of our neighbourhood advisory committee group members submitted a possibility of another local green space. He did quite a well-worded document. So I think that that's something we can bring, not just his one, but the others, to our next meeting. We could look at those and discuss them. And if we let you have them before, they are Combe Beach, Briarcliff Avenue, Central Section, Tony Greaves Wood, Dewhurst Street, and the little wooded area of Manor Road. None of these, I don't think, are controversial actually, but the Dewhurst Street one, which he's written about, wasn't felt to be demonstrably special. It's just a little sort of green space with a bench on it. He argued that it is. In the last sort of review that we did, we just felt that it wasn't. So that can all be brought to the next meeting, I'm guessing. I don't know whether you're planning on bringing policies to the next meeting for us to look at.
Well, if you're happy with the structure of policies, I can get on with the drafting very quickly. So obviously as well, feed through any detail. If there are additional local green spaces, just feed those through to me. And then presumably you'll update your LGS report that was done last time to include those.
In fact, one of our borough councillors, who's not in this group, was so enthusiastic about one of them. He said, I want to write this up. So I'm always grateful for any help in terms of writing these things up. Obviously, Brian Wildman can write up Dewhurst Street. So Ash Sutcliffe has volunteered for the beach. I don't know whether you'd like to write Briarcliff Avenue, Ian. So it's, you know, how it's demonstrably special, close to the proximity of the people that it serves, not an extensive tract of land. But you know how it's used, etc., etc. We put it forward in pride of place to get some fencing and play facilities for it. So there's a potential future improvement in terms of community. I'll write up Manor
Excuse
Road.
me, Chair. So you basically just want a standard SWOT analysis of the area.
Yes, well,
And
yeah, green space analysis so far.
Yeah.
You have to wax a bit lyrical and talk about, you know, why it's special.
There's also future potential. Also, there's one area that we tend to forget about, and I don't think it's ever been mentioned. I might have mentioned it at the bottom of Hall Street.
Yes.
There's some. I think it's still classed as Boundary Street, Blasphemy Square. No, go down Hall Street. There's a wooded area that's fenced off.
Right.
In the mid-2000s, roughly, that was actually designated as a community woodland.
Right.
Funds were given from SRB and ERDF and stuff like that to put the wall around it and gates on, quite a lot of money.
Okay.
Neighbourhood management at the time then locked the gate and mysteriously lost the key, so it's never been open to the public and was conveniently forgotten about.
Secret wood.
Yeah, and it's still technically a community woodland.
Okay, well.
But the community have never been able to gain access to it because neighbourhood management lost the key to the gates.
Quite exciting.
Where's that, Ian?
Bottom of Hall Street.
Well, we can look at this. We'll bring these back.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could just chip.
I know where Cone Beach is.
Yes. What about a minute, Dave?
You don't know Colne Beach, lass?
Where the hell's Cone Beach?
Starkey Bottoms, lass.
Yeah,
Starkey Bottoms.
Starkey Bottoms.
Aye, well, it's these foreigners that keep sneaking up here, don't know local lingo.
Go on, Dave.
Yeah, if I could just chip in. So the analysis has to be against the MPPF criteria.
Yes.
It's basically establishing, it's evidencing that there's a community value, and then you mentioned some of the criteria like close to the community it serves, etc. So it'll be a consistent analysis with what was done last time. But just to emphasise, this is evidence of the community value of the site as it is, and not the potential of the site. If you're identifying a site to improve and do things in the future, that's a project. But local green space has to be based on the community value of the site as now, not its potential.
Okay.
You can't have a lot of woodland.
Okay.
Well, that's funny, isn't it? Because I was looking at.
Sorry.
I was looking at that woodland as we were speaking, thinking actually that woodland needs to be managed appropriately and would be very good in terms of flagging around biodiversity improvements and an opportunity there, depending upon who owns it, basically.
Well, presumably it's Pendle Council, is it?
Yes, it was all by Pendle Council.
So we haven't been offered it in the transfer of land, have we, Gina?
There looks to be. I mean, it's one of those things where you look at the map, and it looks to me that there's quite a long sort of connected network of woodland that would work quite well, actually. It's a conversation to be had about what that looks like in terms of species there.
Space section back to the next
Chair, just to clarify, that land we're talking about was originally owned, I believe, by the Cooperative Society.
Oh.
and it stretched quite a long way along, and it took quite a long time for the council to take ownership.
Right.
You know, there's some sort of a set of stairs that go down from the bottom of Hall Street down to Shaw Street.
Yes.
That land,
That was all the leakage.
yeah, unfortunately, when the stairs were put in, it was actually owned by the co-op, the land, and the people who put the stairs in forgot to get permission or tell anybody, which was embarrassing because quite a bit afterwards, somebody tried to sue the council when they damaged their ankle on the stairs, and the council said there are no stairs there. And then the council then took ownership.
I think if it was owned by the co-op, that it's been sold. But we'll come to this. We'll come to this. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we've got the local green space as a side issue. We've got the new policies, which obviously you could share, or updated policies in advance of the meeting. What else would you like us to bring to the next meeting?
So I could start drafting the policies straight away, and then obviously there's a bit of an interactive process. But we've discussed a few matters of detail like existing biodiversity value, things like that. So anything you want to bring to my attention, now's the time to do that. I'll do drafting from tomorrow, and next week I'll be drafting policies.
So perhaps what Gina needs to do is write to the whole advisory committee and say, are there any specific areas of, separate from the local green spaces, it's areas of great distinction in terms of perhaps the indicator species in the nature recovery work that LCC have done, because they've very clearly laid out what the indicator species are. There's the yellow flower of Jerusalem or whatever, and they've laid out some particular sorts of lichens. They've laid out the red squirrel. They've laid out the curlew. What's that other one? That other bird that we've got on the upper roof that's not the curlew, it's the lapwing. They've laid out the lapwing. So it's these kind of indicator species where it overlaps with the nature recovery. We ask everyone to point those out where they are.
But if you ask them to focus on what planning policy can protect, so what we need to know are what are the features that you think are vulnerable or you'd want to protect, what's their value and what's the risk to them, and then I can reflect that in policy. So it's got to be focused on what obviously we're saying to the developer what we want them to retain and what we want them to incorporate in development, etc. So the more it is to identifying what are the features of value. So the woodlands are an obvious one, your woodland area, and then we can make sure that the policies explicitly mention the features that have a particular value in the area. So for developers, it's really spelling out what you don't want them to do and what you do want them to do when they're designing for a site, So
generally, Comb's got a very low woodland cover because we're an upland area. We do have some veteran trees. We do have some woodland areas that certainly are old and are worth preserving. They're on that habitats map. So hopefully that is clear in terms of woods. But yeah, we can if Gina write to everyone, we can all put our two penneth in, come back to you on those little patches. There'll be patches, I'm guessing. Will there be patches on the habitat map?
Well, some features like mature trees, you can do a catch-all because obviously you couldn't map all the mature trees in the area. But if you've got
mapped all the veteran trees, they're already mapped. Yeah.
If you've got stuff that is mapped, your veteran trees, ancient woodland, anything like that,
that's
or any other landscape designation, we'll just make sure the policy explicitly refers to those types of feature.
Okay, all right.
Sarah, can I just ask? I know at one point you'd said that we could possibly ask or look at adding the upper roof and Lenchers as local green spaces. I know they're already in the Pendle plan.
Yes.
but would there be any merit to
Oh
trying
no,
to add them as well?
we would bring those forward. They're in the Pendle plan,
Yeah.
and we would add them to the list. But I don't think we'd have to do any extra work on them, would we? Because they're in the Pendle plan. We're just taking forward all the things in the Pendle plan and then adding our 5 new local green spaces.
Yeah, that's it. You can explain before or after the policy that it includes the already designated and new designated spaces.
So that's 23, and then we've got our 5, not very big. Then none of them would be. Then I mean, all of them are small, really. I don't think any of them are an acre. No.
Giant.
So they're all small, super local green spaces. I don't think any of them are controversial. They were merely just left out of the last plan, I suppose. So would you like me to also bring the updates on the non-designated heritage assets?
Yeah, any if the neighbourhood plan is is not designated, is identifying non-designated heritage assets. Again, you'll need a background report to justify those.
Yes. Well, obviously, we've done one for nearly all of them.
Yeah,
I'd like
yeah.
to take a couple of them away, partly because one of them's been demolished.
And add
So
a
that's a
few.
non-starter. And
Yeah.
then I'd probably like to add another sort of 5 or so. So I could be working on those.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've done them to a template which says what their significance is and why. I don't propose that by the next meeting we'll have mapped them all again, because that was a big piece of work. But we will have a list and a fledgling descriptions.
So, I mean, for the plan itself, it'll just list them as a clause in a policy. So I'll work with what I've got so far, and then we can just add to that list, can't we?
Well, yes, taking 2 of them out. We'll take 2 of them out. The one that's been demolished and the other one that's been trashed. So, and then adding about 5, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but we were told last time, we were told at regulations 16 that we had to map them all, weren't we?
So local green space, they'll have to be a scale map of it, with all the spaces shown with an accurate boundary in the neighbourhood plan itself, and that'll have to be before regulation 14.
Right. Okay.
Gosh, it was Pendle Borough Council that said that.
Right. It's a lot to do.
It was Liz who mapped the.
She was very kindly did map them. It's a lot.
The non-designated heritage assets.
It's a lot of work. I mean, obviously, it won't be nearly as much work now.
No.
But even so, anything else that you'd like us to do in the interim?
Not really. As I'm drafting, if I've got any questions, I've got your phone number, so I'll just give you a call when as I need to. But what I'll do, I'll come up with the first draft of policies, and then obviously there's a bit of an interactive stage where we can fine tune them, add to the spaces and non-designated heritage assets, etc., and update. So I'll basically come up with a first draft though, so we've got something to work with there for updating.
Okay. Marvellous.
What are you doing on housing sites? I know we don't have to necessarily volunteer anything. That's what the examiner of the Pendle plan said, but we know we should have a few ready up our sleeve. And
so what Dave Chetwin, and I don't know whether Dave Chapman knows this, was proposing when we had our big drive round code, was that possibly there were just loads and loads of areas. So, for example, we were looking at that cottage by the caravan site and various other places. And I was going, oh, this is a potential, and this is a potential, and this is a potential. We're looking at lots of places within the settlement boundary. And they would be challenging from a viability perspective, wherever they are, truth be told. So Dave Chetwin said, why don't you have a new policy as a regeneration area, and then that way you don't have to do the SEA and all of that extra work. You create a policy that promotes, whether we colour in an area, whether we colour in the areas within the area, I don't know, that promotes the fact that we believe that Coney is most sustainable by building small scale, within our settlement boundary.
So the way that would be an area on a map. If you're doing site allocations, there's obviously got to be a methodology, a means of identifying the sites, criteria for selection, etc. And you'll almost certainly need SEA if you're doing additional sites. For a regeneration area, if that, it depends on the policy. If that area was bringing forward greenfield sites, you probably still need to do an SEA. But if you had a regeneration area where it was enabling brownfield development, for example, which is in line with national policy already, you're less likely to need full SEA. But there's no certainty on that. The plan will have to be screened to determine whether full HRA and SEA are required or not. But the regeneration area, that might trigger it. It's less likely to than if you bring in site allocations on, but it would have to be screened. There's no certainty on this. The local authority, the question they would ask, and the three bodies they consult, is would the plan have significant environmental impact? And if the answer to that is yes, then SEA would be required. But I think doing the regeneration area, it's rather simpler than doing obviously there's quite a substantial piece of work to select housing sites and allocate additional ones.
Gina and I have been working. We have sort of put some in a little pot, potentially not brought them forward to discuss with the advisory committee, but based on some of the sites that have been highlighted by the Cone Master Plan, and we'd spoken to some landowners of those sites in the Cone Master Plan, who weren't just making it up as we went along. I'm open to any kind of advice on the best way to proceed.
I mean, if you are planning to allocate sites, then there's got to be a fair, transparent process where landowners can put the sites forward, or you use a recent call for sites where sites have come forward, and then there's got to be a methodology.
That's what we did last time.
Yeah.
Certainly, already a couple of landowners have said that they would be putting their sites forward.
So your regen area, I think that's been identified on more the basis. It's an area that in need of regeneration. What you need to avoid is any kind of ad hoc process where developers put sites forward in an ad hoc way, because it'll lead to objections from other landowners who were given the opportunity. So you either
if it's advantageous to us, we would do another call for sites. It was one of the least stressful things that we did.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility if you want to do additional.
Oh dear. Oh. They both froze. Dear.
Oh dear.
They both froze at the same time.
There's no sort of refresh, is there?
No.
Oh, Dave's moving.
Yeah, sorry, everyone froze. I think it's my end. The problem was. Yeah, sorry about that. Oh, you're moving. That's such a relief.
So you do think that we've got a couple of potential ways of approaching this, including going through the full methodology again, call for sites, then we screened it according to like 27 things, like were the ditches, or I can't remember, it was so detailed. And then none of us could see which ones would come out of the top at a certain level, because it was such a complicated thing. It really was quite exciting to find out the sites that had scored the highest. None of us knew. And then obviously we had to take that forward, regulation 14, etc., etc.
So it's totally up to you, but obviously the decision needs to be taken, because there is a time implication if you're doing the site allocations, in doing the call for sites, developing your selection criteria, going through the selection
We just used
process.
Pendle's selection criteria. We just copied theirs.
Okay, well, I mean that's fine, or you can fine tune it to the particular area. As long as you're happy with it, then it's going to be rigorous enough to meet policy requirements, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
But it's a decision to make now. If you're doing the site allocations, it will almost certainly trigger a full SEA, and so there's a time and cost implication to
Okay.
that.
So what would yeah, I was going to say, what would be the time and cost? Obviously, we got it for free last time, this SEA.
Dave probably knows more than I do what an SEA costs to commission.
Yeah. I mean, my instinct would be, given the number of sites that you might be looking at, you could be talking up to 13,000.
Oh, dear.
I mean, my question would be why? Because you've got 4 sites in the made neighbourhood plan that are
Okay.
also those that are listed as a consequence in the Pendle local plan, and none of those at this stage have come forward for development or are in development. So, I mean, I'm assuming that you would carry those
Yes.
forward to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, given that, and then given a regeneration area, I mean, you've effectively got potentially growth coming through the regeneration area
Okay.
as well in some way, shape, or form. And then there's a question mark about where the other sites might be and what landowners, because if you've got policies that are covering off all aspects of design for the whole of the area, recognizing the significance of the conservation areas, all of those sorts of things, you probably have a good policy base for ensuring that actually anything that does come forward, it would be dealt with appropriately, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other issue then you don't face the very large viability question that
Okay.
an independent examiner
That's
is
been the
likely to throw
nightmare.
at you, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So
And
I was
and
amazed.
Yeah.
and weirdly, actually, within the regeneration area, it would be possible to actually, in some of the narratives, suggest different models of delivery, if that makes sense, so that actually it makes it easier for people to think about how you might bring some of that development forward within that area to kick stuff off.
Well, certainly the viability, as you know, when we spoke in the past, has always been the nightmare for me. And it was the thing that Pendle Council really fought us against. And if we could create a series of policies and a series of different vehicles, community land trust or build your own houses, or different methodologies that would in some way respond to the naysayers of viability within the settlement boundary, and we could do that in a more sort of, not nebulous, but
Yeah.
no,
I
policy
think
framework, as opposed to this site, this many houses, master plan it, which is what we did last time. If that sort of works, I'd like to explore that some more. And
Yeah.
there's also a possibility that we could perhaps do a partnership with perhaps a small local builder, something like that, I don't know, to bring forward some small scale sites.
again, providing that's properly dealt with in terms of your own processes and proper due diligence, etc., and you're going through appropriate tendering processes, then yeah, I mean, and I do think that actually there is an opportunity for you to look at a number of different mechanisms by which to actually enable stuff or support stuff to come forward, basically, which
I think that needs to
so
come to So I think that's
yeah.
a very important piece of discussion point, hopefully for a bigger advisory committee that we can bring to the next meeting, so we can decide the best approach for us at this stage, with some allocated sites in the environment that we're operating in, which is one of immense uncertainty. It sounds like it probably doesn't make sense Gina and I keep our potential allocated sites up our sleeve if we need to for the next iteration of the plan. And for this, we just create this kind of environment of policy that supports regeneration within a defined area.
And if any of those sites up our sleeves ever did come forward, they would comply with the policies we have
All
in
of the other
place
policies.
to
Yeah.
get that framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your other policies are an emphasis on brownfield sites in the existing built areas, etc. So that will enable quite a lot of sites or smaller sites anyway, or opportunities as they come forward, redevelopment opportunities, etc. They're written in anyway, so they're fine. But yeah, I mean, it's actually a stage for after the neighbourhood plan, looking at delivery vehicles and how to make it happen, isn't it?
Okay.
I mean, I think it is, but actually, it's worth looking at that in terms of the policy at this stage as that policy emerges, so that actually you're not, if you like, we're not ruling stuff out, but we're actually
Yeah.
opening up the conversation and mapping something as well. Because the trick of this will be once it's gone through referendum, then actually getting to a point where something kicks off reasonably quickly and starts to change the context for you, and bucks the trend in terms of the viability argument, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you only need two or three of those to actually kickstart stuff off, and the world changes, doesn't it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we can bring that as an extra item to the next meeting, which is sort of regeneration policy, and probably we'll have to explain again the potential reasons why we're not going to directly allocate new sites in the MP in our neighbourhood plan. We could also just make clear, perhaps in the minutes, the point that Emma made, that we'll be taking forward the Pendle local plan sites and adding. We won't revisit the grounds of those again because those arguments have been made. That's been accepted by a planning inspector. So I'll do the houses of the descriptions of the non-designated heritage assets. Together we'll do the extra local green spaces. If you could give us draft policies well in advance, when are we best looking at the next meeting?
A couple of months.
Are we looking at 6 weeks or 2 months?
Well, it depends how quickly you want to move. What I normally do is do an initial draft of policies and then do a fairly quick meeting to run through them, basically, where I'd send them to you. You can have a good look, and then we do an online meeting where we could go through them, make any
So when
changes.
do you think that would be good to do that?
It'd be a few weeks. That will.
So what, a month or 6 weeks or?
Well, no, I think less than that. We could do it in about 3 weeks, something like that.
Right. Okay.
Well,
Well, I don't think that I can do all of the local green spaces and the non-designated heritage assets in that time, but I'll certainly make a start.
They could add into a later draft though, because
Yeah.
there'll be, well, as you
crack
probably
on
know,
with it. It's just that it is a lot for me to do.
yeah.
That's a supporting document.
It is a supporting.
In a sense, what Dave
Central, no,
what Dave wants is just the list changing.
absolutely. So if we
Yeah,
look at
but-
3 weeks, it's perhaps the week commencing the 23rd of February.
Yeah, I mean, some of those changes can go in later as well. It's basically drafting the basic policy, and I'll use the existing sites and buildings, and then we can just adjust it later. I'd suggest a morning as well, because it's quite an in-depth discussion going through policies.
So work, they have jobs, so we can't do mornings.
Well, presumably this meeting would be a more focused group to run through the policies and then present them to the wider group.
Oh, I see.
So obviously
so
there's
like
a stage. Yeah, because I'm going to do an initial draft, but we can run through those then
Okay.
and just fine tune them, and then
Okay, so
then
this
you
is
could
a pre-meeting on Teams, just to run
yeah
through.
yeah that's right,
Okay, so
yeah.
when would you like that?
Well,
I was saying that week commencing 20.
there's the week of the 16th of February.
Okay, week of the 16th. Let's have a look. So I'm doing nothing on Monday, daytime.
Well, shall we say that Monday morning?
Oh, wait a second, Gina's got more things. How are you fixed, Gina? I've got the Friday as well, 20th.
Right there.
Doing all the county town council preparation for the Tuesday night.
Oh, that's true. It's just before your full council. Will it send you into a flat spin?
Possibly, yeah.
Should we go for the Friday? Then it's after the full council.
So I can't do Friday the 20th.
Oh
no. I could do
I can do Thursday.
Thursday's fine. Thursday the 19th.
Thursday's
I'm
the
okay.
exact, but I can do it. I can do it. What's a good time for you? Morning, you say?
Yeah, and I'm fine with early. You know, whatever works best. I'm happy to do an 8 o'clock if that's better for you.
Do you want to do an 8 o'clock, Gina?
No.
She doesn't want to do an 8 o'clock.
I
Okay.
don't usually get in till 5:30 anyway, but 9 o'clock's fine.
9 o'clock. 9 o'clock.
So 9 o'clock Thursday the 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suggest we do an online meeting because we'd struggle to do it with the format of this meeting, So it's going to be a case of sharing the screen, going through and adjusting the policies as required. So it'll be an online meeting, I'd suggest, and fairly focused one. So we said 9 o'clock on the 19th.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what I'll try and do is I'll get the policies to you well before then, so you've got an opportunity to read through, and then we can just go through the documents and do an initial set of adjustments, and yeah.
Wait a second. For some reason, my phone thinks that I need to invite all these other people, but I don't. I don't know how to change that. I think I probably need a 12-year-old to help me.
Want me to do it?
Yeah, do. There you are.
Those are the 19th. Okay.
Because at the moment it wants me to invite Michael Wallach, and I just don't know how to stop it. So
I mean, I can do something in the morning.
So that would be who will be in the meeting for that?
So I would obviously suggest Gina, me.
Yeah.
David, could you take some time off work to do it or not?
It's possible, yeah. It's first thing in the
We
morning.
ought to invite Brian Wildman because he's the deputy chairman. And that's probably
Okay.
enough.
Yeah,
I would have
say
thought.
that's enough. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that sounds great. Yeah. Okay, so we got a timetable there, haven't we?
So then, after that, what would be the best time after that for a whole group meeting? Is that another couple of weeks while that's sort of fed in, or is it a bit more?
I suppose it
Well,
depends.
I'd usually do the adjustment straight during or straight after the meeting. So you'd have a next version very quickly after that. So the following week you could distribute it.
All right. We're not used to this, are we, Gina?
No. Well, then we
You're
have to
looking
give
at Michael Wellach timetable, aren't you?
we have to give people a chance to read through it though.
Okay. So if we have the next version in the next week, then the next week, which is the first week of March, would be the best time for it. And I'm totally free on Monday, the 2nd of March.
There was a certain night of the week to do these.
Also Tuesday, we never have had with the neighbourhood plan.
No, okay.
Tuesday, I'm totally free, and bizarrely Wednesday too. Can't believe this is true. What suits you, Gina?
Are there any town council meetings of any kind?
She's looking.
It doesn't. Oh, the third will be FES.
So do you want to be after FES?
Yes.
So Wednesday the 4th.
Fourth.
Wednesday the 4th. David, will you put that in the diary?
Wednesday
So that's
the
an
4th.
evening meeting at 6:30 for the whole advisory committee on Wednesday the 4th, and they'll have had all of the things for a week to look at.
Okay, so you'd want me to attend that meeting? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's 6:30 on Wednesday the 4th.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, done.
I mean, what I could do, if you like, I could talk through the policies first, just to talk through them with
Absolutely.
everyone, and yeah, and then any discussion. But I think if we've done that earlier meeting where we do a lot of fine tuning, it'll make it much easier, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else that you'd like us to think about, study, research?
Can I just ask, have we got an overall timetable when we want to try and do regulation 14 then?
So you will have to have the plan screened. Once you have a final document, you've got or a version of the plan, that it does need to be completely completed, but it's got the maps in of the the regen area, the local green spaces, etc. You'll be able to get the plan screened. So potentially you could get it screened. It depends. Depends how quickly you can get a document to that
I'm
point.
just sort of thinking, with the local government reorganisation, obviously at some point we're going to need Pendle's planning officers to do some stuff and coordinate, all the referendum and all that kind of thing as the end game. But before then, they've got to help out with various things, and if they're all busy doing other things, then we need to make sure that we time it right so that we get their effort, and we don't. I mean, do we want to make it as early as possible? Do we want to wait until as late as possible so it's got the longest life possible?
Well, I get it
Strategy in
screened
this?
as soon as you've got a version that's almost completed, but it's got the basic policies in and the maps. As soon as you've got to that stage, I'd submit the plan to the planning authority and ask them to screen it for full SEA and HRA. And bearing in mind, if you're taking forward the sites from last time, they will have had an SEA last time, full SEA last time. So they will have to screen it, and that'll take a couple of months. So that's going to take you to the early summer, potentially. So in parallel to the screening, you could do some engagement with in the area, just telling people why you're updating the plan, what the the policy themes will be. I wouldn't share policies at a formative stage. I wouldn't put them into the public realm until you get to Reg 14, because it's really confusing to people to have different versions of policies, and it can lead to difficulties with the statutory consultation later. So I'd test the themes, what the plan, why you're updating it, what the plan is going to do in parallel to the screening. And then after that, if the outcome of the SEA of the screening is that full SEA is required, that piece of work will have to be commissioned, and that'll take a couple of months at least. If it isn't required, you could do Reg 14 probably late summer, around the autumn, that kind of time.
Okay. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to
All right.
know.
Yep.
Okay. All right then. Well, jolly good. We've got lots to do.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I think that, our 6.5-year foray into our first neighbourhood plan was sort of shot in the dark, really. I mean, none of us knew what we're doing.
We'll do this one in 6.5 months at this rate.
We know what we're doing a bit more now. And we also know where we want to improve. We see where we want to improve.
And this will be much quicker because we're not starting with a blank canvas this time, and it's a review of the plan. So this will be quicker. So the Reg 14 will take, well, the consultation itself will be 6 weeks, and then the analysis and preparation of the consultation statement and amendment to the plan will happen after that. So that's going to take it well into autumn, late into the year. The plan's then submitted, and there's a publicity period the local authority will undertake of 6 months. But that is only legal compliance by that stage. It's not an open consultation like Reg 14 is. It's only about whether the plan meets the basic conditions and other
Yes,
legal
I remember.
requirements.
Yes.
Yeah, because the reps go to the examiner basically. Then there'll be an examination, modifications and referendum. So you're probably looking referendum fairly early next year. But the plan will start to carry weight. The new plan would start to carry weight at the end of the local authority's publicity period. So into the examination phase, it would start to carry weight.
And would we be likely, as an update to a made plan, to have another public inquiry?
Did you have an actual hearing last time?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, did you? Right. That's probably the site allocations that triggered that.
Yes.
So hopefully there will be no need for that because they had just been taken forward in this plan. So I would imagine it could be dealt with by written reps. But
No, I hope so. I don't think I can go
yeah.
through that again.
Or rather, the way it works is not. It's kind of not written reps. It's actually the examiner will look through the plan, come back with questions and requests for clarification, and you would then answer that in
We did
writing.
that as well, didn't we, Gina?
Yeah.
That was hard work too.
Well, hopefully you wouldn't need the hearing. It'd just be done by the examiner asking for clarification, and you and the planning authority going back on that. But that's the kind of timetable.
Okay, well, we put our best foot forward. That's all we can do, and that's what we do. We do it with positivity. We're doing it because we love Cone, and we think we want it to be better, and we can project it. So thank you very much for all of your help and advice and thoughts tonight. And we'll see you by Zoom, Gina.
Yes,
for that morning meeting.
I'll send
Gina will send out the thing about sort of special ecological areas, and we'll try to get some buy-in on that. We'll work away on our local green spaces. I know it's a background document, but it's important. And we'll work away on our non-designated heritage assets as well. And hopefully we'll be able to pull everything together in the summer.
Yes.
Okay.
Marvellous. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
Brilliant.
Thank you very
Cheers.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.